Well, the book of Numbers, again, is an intriguing book. There's just so much there, and we often read past it. We just don't pause and take a look at what God is doing there as part of his story, part of his relationship to his people, and even counting, even numbering people. It will occur twice in this book. Hence, we get the name Numbers for this book in our English translations. God counting, or at least encouraging or instructing his leadership, Moses and others, to count the people as a way to, I think, one, remind them that something important has been accomplished. There was a promise about making Israel into a great nation. Abraham and Sarah received that. They waited 25 years to have their first child. What about this great nation? Well, when you read the book of Numbers, we count and we count and we count again, and we get a very, very large population that God brings out of the land of Egypt. God has, in a sense, greenhoused a great nation in the land of Egypt. He fulfilled his promise. He was faithful. And that's part of the story of the Pentateuch, God being faithful to covenant. It's part of the story, really, of the entire Hebrew Bible and Old Testament. God keeps his word. He's faithful to what he says he's going to do. And that first counting was a reminder. That first census reminds us that God kept his word. He grew a nation over time and brought them out of Egypt. Well, that generation failed to believe fully in God. They couldn't fully commit to that covenant relationship. And we learn in Acts chapter 7, in the speech of Stephen, that in their hearts they turned back to Egypt. And God said, okay, I'll work with the next generation. And that first generation was in a sense judged and doomed to continue that desert trek until they passed off the scene, and God worked with that second generation. Then we're going to count again. There's a second counting, a second census. And when you look at the numbers, what I find intriguing, I see it as a miracle, a minor miracle, however you want to read this, the numbers are almost identical. During that desert wandering experience, during that time in the Sinai desert, God preserved, God somehow sustained his people to almost the same level that they came out of Egypt in by way of numbers. That's remarkable as you think about God's faithfulness, God's preservation, God's ability to sustain, uphold, and, in a sense, continue to maintain that nation he said he would build back there in Genesis 12. And so I just like to remind myself and my students that, you know, even as we count, there's something very important here in these census takings. There's something about God. There's something about faithfulness. There's something about covenant promise. There's something about sustaining grace in terms of God and his work with the Hebrews. And so even when it comes to something that we might think is mundane, like census taking, God's there, and God's doing a good work, and God's reminding us of who he is and how he's going to work in the world by keeping his promises to grow this nation of Hebrew people.